Welcome back to the Football Fitness Federation podcast. This is episode 345. I'm delighted to welcome onto the podcast today Kirk Phillips. How are we doing?
All good, thank you. Nice to be here. I'm
Thank
looking
you very
forward to it.
much for coming on, mate. We spoke about doing this a little while ago, and I know I've
Yes.
been dropping a few messages in and there to get you on because I think your career so far is interesting. It's something that people can definitely learn from, and we'll get into it in a little bit. But working abroad and some of the things you've taken from working abroad is really going to be interesting for the listeners. So yeah, massive thank you for coming on, mate.
Thank you for having me. Long time listener, so it's nice to actually give something back and actually do it. So
Awesome. That's great to hear. Kurt, we always start, like you've heard plenty of times before, we start on your background. So I wanted to dive into that because I've just referenced it there. So can you take us back and give us a little bit of a story on where you've been, what you've been up to, and what you're doing currently?
yeah, no problem. So I'll start the same way as probably most of you guys done. I just was a sport kid, like football, obsessed with football. Not very good at it, but obsessed with it. So you know, going through school, do okay. You're going to university, go into sport. At the start, it wasn't like you're obsessed with sports science. You like the interest of it. You love the football part. You love the sport. In the first couple of years, you're just at university, just understanding, learning, just try to get through it. Whereas when I went into the third year of my undergrad in Hamilton, in Scotland, as you can tell with the accent, uh, I did an internship working with Motherwell. That's my local team. I was working there with a guy you've had on before, Andy Bowles, and Michael King, who's in at the academy, just basically observing, doing the standard internship. So while I was there, picking up the cones, but engaging, speaking with the players in the gym, looking at how they go around their screening, what kind of stuff, how can I learn the practical aspects of it. It was really hands on, really variable in terms of what the tasks were. So you were sometimes working with the first team, sometimes with the academy, just trying to build up your experience while you're there. Done that for the third year. We did a topic, a little research project in it, and then in the fourth year, continued that and done the thesis with them. So they were really good, really helpful. And at that point, you're now quite invested in making that your career. So from there, after the fourth year, I went on straight into my masters. Did a 1 year straight there. Went to Edinburgh. While I was there, I was helping out local teams, the usual stuff, helping some female teams, doing a little broader experience, just to try and expand and working in a gym when just to get the actual hands-on experience of working with clients and seeing the different populations and how they work. And then COVID hit, and as it happened to everyone, all your plans going to work with this club, going to do this, everything out the window. So that was me for a year working from home in a gym, doing video online classes. That was my experience of it. Going runs every day, just keeping fit. And then afterwards, I had the opportunity to. This is where my story goes a little bit different from some others in UK. I went abroad. I went to Midtjylland. I'm not sure if you've seen. They've got a really structured program now with in terms of interns and bringing people from different aspects and countries across to do a variety. So they've got sports science. They've got guys for performance analysis. They've got coaches. They've got goalkeeper coaches. So they look at it in a broad aspect and bring in people from different countries. When I went, it was the second year that it was running. Yeah, first or second year when it went. So when I went over, did a year there internship where you are called an intern, but really structured and really advanced in terms of it's like a full time role. So you're in all the way through. You're part of the structure. You're essentially really responsible for age groups and the first team. So my role was under 19s. However, the structure, the way it works, and I'll get into that, is you work with the under 17s and the first team. So you get a really good experience. And then did that for a year. And then my boss, the head of performance at Midtjylland at the time, he moved to Sparta Prague. And at the end of my internship, he took me over to Sparta Prague with him to become the first team sports scientist there. So basically became a Scottish part of a Danish contingency, just snuck my way in, hang on the coattails for a little bit, and spent 3 seasons there so far at Sparta. just working in the first team, helping develop what their structure is. So that's where I'm at currently just now.
In a second, I want to get into the initial move and mainly advice for coaches because I said before we started recording this, you're seeing more and more coaches looking for that move abroad now. So it'd be great to tap into that in a second. What I wanted to cover first was you being in your role now with the first team. How beneficial has it been for you to have experiences with under 19s and some of the age groups that are going to be feeding into you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Yeah, that's a good point because I think if I had to go straight into the first team, you would find yourself struggling to understand the relationships with me personally. I think you would struggle to understand how you speak to players, how you approach players, how they react in terms of different questions. And when you're coaching them, who do you speak to and what language? Whereas when you're working with the under 19s and under 17s and the younger categories, you can approach it, you can make mistakes. They're very friendly in terms of how you come to them and how you adapt to them. So the coaching language changes a little bit, but you can practice on it. And that's not to say that under 19s is just a practice. It's not at all. It's an extremely high level. But you get opportunities there to speak to people who haven't experienced everything that you've learned, and you get to educate yourself how you put it across. So you get that kind of relationship development, and it's quite important for that for me when I went into the first team that I could use the skills I'd learned from the soft skills, what you really use, which is probably 90% of what you do is the soft skills, how you interact. And then once you go to the first team level, you can already engage a conversation and build that kind of relationship to then put across the knowledge you've got there.
That's a great point. No, it's really interesting that as well. Um, Obviously, we touched on the decision and taking the opportunity to move abroad. Talk to us at that around that point of time. There must have been some hesitancy and doubts and things about a move because you mentioned before about your studies and everything was within Scotland, relatively close together. Obviously, where you're from, local clubs, and then there was the move. And again, I really want to target this at maybe people that are in a similar sort of position where an opportunity might come up. Talk us through that thought process at that time, which obviously led to the move. Some of the positives, negatives that you sort of ran through, and then what ultimately made that decision for you.
Yeah, no problem. I think, as you mentioned, a lot of people I do. I've had many people message on LinkedIn and messages just like, "I've had this opportunity. Should I go for it? Or I really want to go abroad." And I've always spoke quite positively with it, with some sort of background, what you need to take care of. When it came to my turn, I applied. It was no specific trick on how to get the job. It was just an application. Applied for LinkedIn, sold my CV and cover letter, then had a interview over call, basically. And the UK way of doing stuff, where we go with the shirt and tie, everything. And straight away it was Christian Clark that done my interview, and he just said, "What are you wearing?" And it's that immediate culture difference where they're like, "You're not wearing it's a football interview. Wear a football stuff. Just relax and take it a little bit more casual." And we had a good conversation about what we thought and everything. And then the next day, it was offered the job. So it was as quick as that. And it was, you've got, I can't remember exactly, but it was something like 2 days or 3 days to decide if you're taking it. So in the space of maybe 72 or hours or something, you've got to make the decision, are you moving abroad in the next couple of weeks? So for me, it was quite a big turnaround, and it's probably got to be the same for a lot of coaches now, where a job comes on and it's at this time of season, pre-season starts soon, so they want to get people in early. So right now, if someone's listening and they've got the opportunity, it will be similar that they have to make a quite immediate decision. And for me, I had to speak to my family, but the way I kind of built it is, if it doesn't work, the worst case scenario is you move back home. You don't lose any. The only thing, you don't even lose time because you gained an experience.
Yeah.
There's no negatives in terms of you took a chance. You can just move back home if it doesn't work, and it's the same with every job. I think making it simplifying it down to it's a job opportunity helped me a lot. Where I can say, okay, yes, it's in a different country, but if it was in this country, would you take it? Yes. Okay. It helps that they kind of structure that you can get accommodation and this stuff. Of course, if you're when you're moving to a job and you don't have that accommodation, this is stuff that you need to consider. But it'd be the same if you're moving to a job in a different part of your own country. So simplifying it that way and understanding that the worst case scenario is that you just return home and you've learned, okay, what do I didn't do work, we reflect on it. So for me, the negatives are actually a positive because you can reflect on it and develop yourself going there. So that my advice in terms of that is simplify the decision. Is this something a risk you want to take? Simply take it like that.
I love that. I think that's great advice. Do you think that time period, though, as well, that short turnaround time from sort of decision to be made, was actually beneficial? Because if they'd have said, like, you've got 30 days to make your decision, you'd have probably changed your mind about 30 times
Yeah,
at the time, wouldn't you? So it's probably quite a good thing, I'm guessing, that it's short and sharp as well.
yeah, 100%, 100%. I think if the longer you have it, the more you see other opportunities coming up, and you try and dither and sway and what you actually want in life, and you might start to talk negatively and complicate it. So that the short time period, keeping it simple is the best thing that happened for sure.
Awesome. And then have you got anything else in terms of advice? So if people land a position or a role abroad, was there anything you maybe do differently? And I'm talking more now on a personal level, probably in
Yeah,
terms of like you actually getting out to a new country, a new city. What sort of advice would you give people in that sort of situation?
yeah. I think striking that balance of a social life as well. Of course, you're over there and you're absorbed in this world where football is everything and you've got to be everywhere all the time. And me personally, I'm a workaholic in terms of that. I can't take that off. But taking advantage of the culture in terms of going out in the city at night, experience it, speaking to the locals and all this, it's something that I did do, but it's something I would definitely push it. Don't put yourself in a bubble. Otherwise, you'll miss out a lot of opportunities in terms of understanding their culture and how they do it. And as well, speak to the people at the club. Most clubs that will bring someone in from abroad will speak English, or you can learn a little bit of the language and you can engage and you can develop yourself as a practitioner through just understanding their way of life and how they came through the coaching system in their country or their friends and family. How do they balance their stuff? Because I'm going to guess a lot of the people that will be having these opportunities might be early in their career. There'll be some that's late, but there'll be a lot that's early, and maybe they don't have the restrictions of a girlfriend or a wife or a children or pets or whatever it is. And for me, I didn't have the restrictions of that, so I could move and there was no children tying me down. I know that's a massive consideration, of course, but in terms of young people moving over now, take into consideration what other people have done to move across or to live in that country and see how they do it so that when you make the move again, likely when you're abroad, you move to a different country abroad, you'll have the considerations in your head anyway.
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. And it's obviously something I wanted to speak to you about because you obviously get the messages from people asking that are in similar positions. And I think it's really important to cover because I'm sure there's plenty of people listening that either in the position now or potentially going to be in that position in the future as well. When you arrived at the club, what was initial thoughts? Was there any lessons that sort of jumped out immediately to you? And then what was the approach that you took sort of initially in the role?
Yeah, so immediately, the first thing I saw was how structured everything is, especially in Scandinavian countries. They have a really good system embedded not just through football, but through the education. So everything's interlinked. They're really good at structuring it, which in Scotland there is some of, but some clubs lack the structure for whatever reasons, and there's not as much a strong link between schools and education systems in the football. And when I went there, everything is set out. The schedule of the academy, how they run, is aligned with the school. The school fixes everything along to them. So trying to understand and work in with that. So, for example, the under 17s and 19s would train at 6:45 in the morning. Around 7 o'clock, have a 2 hour session, go to school. Then immediately after school, they would come for a gym session. The school included topics that fit the structure of an academy of football. So it wasn't your typical school, but it was like a blend between the two. So understanding how do we periodise and load and everything through that in a structure that's well set out already. What are we adapting and what are we changing for the players, and how will it influence that? So that was the first thing. That and the language and the accent. It's probably a big one if you're from Scotland, Liverpool. I worked with some guys from Nottingham and Derby. They didn't really have the same kind of constraints as me, where I'm trying to tell a player to go on a bike and they're like, what? What's he saying? So that was a huge change, and trying to get a coaching voice and an identity that worked. So that's what I would say is trying to create your own identity that's different from when you're in your home country. It's going to be, you've got to have an adapted identity and coaching style and personality. Because like if I use jokes from UK TV shows, it's other than Love Island, they love Love Island over there. I can't bond using Gavin and Stacey or something like this,
Yeah.
So you've got to find your own kind of niche within that.
Again, it's really important. That's that because these are the conversations that you'll have with players, aren't they? And I mean, it's the same with players that are not necessarily from the UK that are playing here as well, isn't it? If you're trying to speak about those sorts of things, you've got to find common ground, haven't you? You've got to find things that are
Yeah.
going to be interesting for both sides. No, I think it's really, really good advice around that. Did you have a plan going into, and not just in terms of the initial move, but also the move to Sparta Prague, in terms of player relationships? So you going into a new club, new set of players, was there anything where you were like planning on, right, I want to try and develop my relationship with players by doing this? Or was it just a case of like you've said, having these conversations with players and just trying to find out more common ground?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if it was a plan, but I had ideas. It wasn't like a set out plan, but I had ideas. So when I worked with teams and local clubs and Motherwell and everything here, one of the things that I found is music. So in the gym, playing the songs that you type of like, speaking about this kind of stuff, finding that kind of, I don't want to say vibe because I'll sound like a TikToker, but it's true. You find that kind of style that fits. Yeah, I thought that was quite a good one because especially when you move to Denmark, almost everyone speaks good English. So they listen to English music, they listen to French, they listen to Danish, of course, but they listen to like every country. So engaging with them through that kind of stuff really helps. Uh, being yourself, but being yourself and open to listen to them as well. Because when I worked in Denmark, it was multiple cultures. They had a really strong link to Nigerian football schools. They had a lot of African boys come in, but they also had a lot of Scandinavian from the different countries. Some German boys would be there, Brazilian, a lot of South Americans. When I was there, I think it was 7 or 8 Brazilian players there. So you've got a real big culture shift. So it was understanding, speaking to them, having a little information I'm really obsessed with football, so I know a lot of football clubs and players, and speaking about stuff that they might relate to, that like maybe Nigerian boys that played in Scotland or Brazilian players that played in Scotland or in the UK that you've come across and can talk and just kind of appeal to them, but with your own interests. So it's not robotic that you've just heard something before repeating it, but it's something that you actually have an interest in. They can sense that you're not just saying it to speak to them because you've got a 30-minute bike session with them and you need to fill a gap. But you're actually trying to engage with them and find out what their passions are.
Yeah, brilliant. That's top. What was the experience? Because obviously Christian moved in the same direction as yourself. So obviously you're going with Christian, who's in a head of performance role in both clubs. Is that
Yep,
right?
yep.
So what was that when you moved to Sparta Prague? What was the sort of experience of you moving as part of Christian's team? Was that slightly different to the initial move? Was it because obviously he's then going to introduce you? You're part of his staff, then, aren't you? You're not someone that he's just
Yeah,
recruited. He knows you. He spent time with you. Was that slightly different?
it was different, and it was also different. Would have been different for Christian because it was his first time working abroad.
Yeah.
So he's gone through changes that he has not experienced before. I've had a small experience, but only one time. So there was a lot of change, not only for me, but for the head of performance. The manager at the time, he was also Danish, Brian Priske. There was a few other Danish staff there, and we're coming into a culture in the Czech football that is quite localized. Most of the teams have Czech staff. Almost everyone is Czech. They've had started a couple of times with like Italian manager staff that came and went, but mostly the league is Czech or Slovakian or localized regions. So when we're coming in, it's that finding that balance of being us and how we want to implement and the style of play, but also trying to merge into the Czech culture a little bit and how they work because it was totally different from the Scandinavian way for sure. It was more relatable towards the Scottish way. So I found it a little bit more easier, or I can't speak for them, but I found it quite easy in terms of understanding their thought processes and how to balance it between Scandinavia.
What were those key differences then that you felt?
Structure
Okay.
and roles within the team,
Yeah.
uh, the focus on strength and conditioning. It was a lot more power based in the Scandinavian style, more traditional in the Czech style, or yeah, more physio based staff, kind of mobility stuff like this, whereas we wanted a high pressure stuff that related to the style of play of Brian Prisker, a lot of repressure stuff that we need to get rid of force development, we've got to get a lot of axels, D cells, so we've got to protect them and prepare them in a way for that style manager. Then we were very data organised and objective with everything that we do that maybe some of the stuff weren't as used to in the club. So they collected data, but we just wanted to collect it in a little bit different way and more stricter and be more objective with our decisions. So that took time to just, we had a full buy-in from the staff coming into it. But when we went there, he's still there. We've got a researcher, Dr. Thomas Malley, who, if you've done a undergrad or a postgrad or a research paper, you probably wrote Malley et al. At some point. He's really good and really forthcoming with it and futuristic. He's Slovakian, so immediately when you go there and you're bringing these ideas and being objective and doing research based stuff, and you've got a guy like that there, he's a link in between the staff to say, okay, what they're doing is for the greater good. So it was quite good to have that.
Brilliant. Want to get into your current role now and the some of the things you're implementing with the players. And I saw you do the post around match day priming.
Yes.
Um, I think it's really, really interesting and definitely something I want to explore. So, can you give anyone that's not seen it? Obviously, it's on your LinkedIn. Was it just LinkedIn you posted it on?
Yeah, just LinkedIn. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can go and check it out on LinkedIn. But I encourage people to go and read it. But we're going to cover just around about the sort of research, the thought process that went into the structure of your priming sessions. But also, was this in place before? Was this something new that the players were doing?
Yeah, so the last bit first there, no, they weren't doing it before. So it was new from us. So it was as soon as we went there, it was implemented in the pre-season. So it was familiarised. So we made it quite a point there. We're not going to introduce it in season and make any chance of disturbances because ultimately the match performance is always priority.
Yeah.
So it was led by Christian, a lot of it, and a lot of feedback from Dr. Malas. I'll call him Malas. That's how I know him. Malas and myself, and how we could structure it properly. So I'm not going into too much detail of it, but it's basically a mobility warm up, just some huddles and move to side as they put out there. We do a counter movement jump test, one set of three, maximum effort. Then they do loaded jumps, two sets of three with VBT, so velocity based tracking, so we'll track throughout. Then we'll do some slams and some sled push, 15 minutes total, and then that out the gym. So nice, short, sharp, but intensive. So each exercise is a max or near maximum effort, but with a short time. So there's no onset fatigue. Basically, I know there's not a strong consensus in the research with it. There's some pros, some saying, okay, there's no positive effect, some saying there's no negative effect, but there's a lot that will say positive. I think one of the research that we worked with a lot was Tony Modric. He did one quite recent, actually, in 2023. He done, and there was a few before, and they were looking at it in terms of a match day priming. So we do it in a match day, and how it affects actual performance later on in the day. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to attenuate the testosterone levels later on in the day, because we know that it peaks in the morning and tails off later on in the day. So we're just trying to attenuate it, or maybe a second spike later on in the day, because we know that it has a role on the contractile function of the motor cortex output facilitation. There's the physiological responses based on that. But there's also the psychological components, such as motivation and drive and the competitive nature in the game. So if we can try and push that on later in the evening towards a match time, we're hoping for the positive effects that was kind of seen in Modric. So he saw that there was a significantly greater total distance, which, okay, is not as a big driver for match result or performance, but also we saw a moderate effect size in moderate intensity running, and then again in high intensity running, and a slight but not significant increase in high intensity accels and decels. So for sure, a positive impact. I'm not saying it's causality, because you don't know for sure. There could be multiple factors, but for us, it was what we saw could make a small difference, and it can make a big positive impact on our performance later in the day. So yeah, we decided that on a match day was better for our structure, because on match day -2 we would do a power session. So match day -1 repeating it, which some of the practitioners have had quite a few people calling out saying, "Oh, we tried it in a match day -1, which is brilliant. This fits their system. How can they adapt it?" Because there's a little bit longer time until the match, so there's no residual fatigue. Whereas we would do it around 6 to 8 hours before a game in the morning. And there was no, because of the short, sharp, intensive, and the exercises were more power based, there wasn't really that residual fatigue in the match. And we'd calculate this, we'd have feedback subjective from the players about how ready they are to perform in the match. And there was no real fatigue or influence on the match readiness. So we knew that the time given was enough. And as I mentioned there about the psychological components, we put in this counter movement jump testing. It wasn't at the start of the priming, it was introduced a little bit later, because we thought, okay, we're testing throughout the season, we're down doing a loaded jump. Can we do a priming for the loaded jump and use the drive and the testosterone levels in the CMJ to try and get a maximal output? So we've got a feedback there with the score. And it benefited us, because a lot of the max performances, whether it be jump height, whether it be eccentric depth or eccentric power, total power, takeoff power, a lot of them came in the match day performance. Now, of course, I'm not saying the only reason is because of it was done in a priming session, but the psychological benefits of the motivation, the drive, and having that feedback with the high testosterone could be one of the reasons why we saw such.
That's really interesting. I think it's fascinating. One thing I was going to ask is around about the timing, but I think you kind of answered that in terms of when this takes place. What's your typical match, your kickoff time?
Yeah, because we are like the biggest club in Prague, it's normally on the TV, so it's the evening kind of games. Sometimes it's earlier, so let's just say it was like 5, 6
Yeah.
on the TV. We would do it around 10 o'clock ish, around this, maybe give or take, depending if it's home or away. We would still do it away. I know that's a question I got a few times from practitioners. It was okay, but what happens when you're away from home? It's okay when at home because we've got all the equipment there. We've got the squat racks and this. We would still do the training session in away games. We'd do it in the hotel. I think the only change it would really do was change the back squat to like a trap bar lump jump or a dead dumbbell jump. So they're still getting a loaded jump. Everything else stayed the same. Timings, everything. It just meant the practicalities that some people need to consider, and it was my job to make sure everything was packed and everything was there, everything was set up, and that's time consuming. It's a commitment that you need to make, but the consistency of we do this every week, well, twice, 3 times a week sometimes. It kind of pays off because the players got in a routine straight in. As we talked about earlier about the music, that's one of my big things. I was in music in the gym, unless a certain Slovakian player came in and it was Slovakian music. Uh, but straight away, with some away trips when you're in a hotel and they've got like a speaker and they've got a microphone, and we had boys singing Adele in the morning at a game, about to do jumps and slams and everything. You've got karaoke on, and for us, it was like no problem. Eventually, we had a basketball net up in the gym, so some of the boys would play basketball before it. On
Mm.
away days, we'd take a ball and a couple extra hurdles. They'd play two touch or football, tennis. So we're quite big on that kind of. There's individuality of what you want to do. It was never forced in terms of okay, you need to play the fun games or you need to be there. If you just want to come in, do the gym session and go, fine. But there was that individuality as well where some players we allowed them that freedom to express themselves that way.
I can imagine with that as well, because obviously match day, there can be a lot of match day nerves going on as well, isn't there? And when you've got that time from waking at whatever time it is in the morning till 5, 6 o'clock, it's a lot of time to sort of be strolling up and down the hotel room and
Yeah.
and trying to sort of keep yourself busy for that amount of time, isn't it? So I imagine that period in the gym and being able to apply some intensity to, even though it's a short session, probably helps with that as well.
Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. I mean, there's loads of ways to do it, and a lot of teams will go a walk, a lot of teams will play rondos. I saw the other week Livingston put up what they do a like, heading competition, and one of the dogs ran on the pitch and headed the ball in the net. I mean, that's one way to do it, but for us, as you say about the nerves, getting that kind of explosive effort can also help with the nerves to just settle down, get that kind of release of energy that maybe some others don't, but there are other benefits, more relaxed. So yeah, it's true. Just get them doing something to distract a little bit from what their head is thinking about.
I'd love to go into a bit of player feedback on that in a second, but just I think you answered this just a short while ago. But you know the weighted jumps. Did you say they were like a backloaded? Was it
Yeah,
barbell when you're at home?
yeah.
Yeah,
Barbell at home. Yeah,
and then
on the velocity.
you'd shift to trap bar away when you're traveling.
Yeah, trap bar, dumbbells,
Yeah,
whatever's most convenient.
no,
Yeah,
that's cool. I thought you'd said that. Yeah. So player feedback. What was this like initially when you put it in place with the players? Was there any sort of resistance? And also, what's been the feedback from you? Because obviously, we can look at data, we can look at match performance, but a lot of this stuff and a lot of routines, and especially match day, it comes back to consistency, doesn't it? And what players like to do. So, what's the feedback been like from yourself?
yeah. It's a good point. It's one that most of the practitioners say is I've got boys that don't want to do it. They'll tell you nothing. When we went there, as I said, went as a group, so we had a strong leadership in terms of we're all in the same box. The manager was really strong on supporting the sports science department. The head of performance, Christian. you spoke with Christian. He's a very strong leadership, really, really strong. If he believes in something with reason, we will do it. He will find a way to do it. He's a top practitioner, and he's really good at getting the message across that we do it. And people like myself and Malas, it's on us to implement it. So we will have the conversations with players like, oh, why do we need to do this? Those kind of calm ones. So Christian at the start laid out what we do and why we do it. And then these small conversations would be between Malas, myself. Malas being Slovakian, he can speak Czech, been there a long time, he can relate to the type of players. And then myself being an outsider but in the group, I could relate to a lot of the younger players. I could relate to most of the players, to be honest. That was probably my pro of being there, because I could speak to quite a few of the players and find that balance. Now, not everyone wants to do it. If you've got a flair player, it's a typical the winger that doesn't want to do it. One, it's being strong in the leadership that, okay, you need to do it and this is why. However, you tell us what you don't like about it. And if it's in our interests and your interest that we can make a change, then it's possible. So if you can't jump for whatever reason, you've got jumpers and patella tendon off me, or you've got an chronic ankle instability and jumping is not for you and you're a bit nervous, even though you can't practically do it, we'll make adaptations in the session that benefit you. So we'll put you in a Kaiser squat machine, or we'll change it to loaded squats instead, or whatever we thought was practical. So we'd have that kind of adaptation, but while being strict in terms of we need to do it because this is X, Y, and C in the research, and this is our philosophy. So that was it. So of course you get players that don't want to do it. Especially it might even be the person that's the most professional player that they've got stuff going on in their life and they wake up that game day, they're not picked for whatever reason, and they go, oh, I don't want to do this. For me, it's about speaking to them, relating to them, but at the same point saying, but we're doing it.
Yeah.
Being strong with it, with your beliefs.
Yeah, I think that's important. And the setting the tone, like you've mentioned, like Christian's obviously done in yourself, of we're not just putting this in place for the sake of putting it in place, we're doing it for these reasons. Players will a lot more willing to put the effort in when that's been laid in place, isn't it? The foundations and rationale. I think it's really important. No, it's really interesting. I'm sure you might get a few questions sent in to you on that.
Like, can you speak to my 24-year-old pro that doesn't want to do it?
Exactly.
Don't worry.
You're going to be doing a few calls with a few players after this to convince them. But no, I think you gave some really good advice there on standing strong and putting something in place, getting the backing from staff, getting everyone aligned on it as well is really important, isn't it? Because if you're saying they need to do it and Christian's going, you don't worry about today, or this it's not aligned, is it? So it's really important that everyone's on the same page.
Exactly. And that's when, especially if we talk about if you're abroad, you may have the troubles with foreign staff that don't believe in this, or they've got a different way of doing it, or even last season before you came to the club, they were doing rondos and now they're in the gym. It's explaining to them and trying to get the buy-in from them that can ultimately help with the players. Don't always need to go push for the players to get the buy-in. Sometimes it's create the environment and then the players are in there, especially when you've got young boys coming up. They're desperate to do everything. They'll just do what you say.
Yeah.
Older boys, if you relate with them, they'll do it. And then the ones in between will see young boys doing it. 70, 80% of the boys are already doing the gym. It's just the norm. That's just what we do.
Brilliant. Can you touch on, just to wrap us up, so I appreciate your time. And I don't want to take all day, but because I could probably take all day on this episode going into some of it. But just talk to us about how you guys are using data, because you referenced it a little bit before, but how you're using data, how that's informing some of the decisions and the practices that you guys are putting in place.
Yeah, as I said, it's quite, most teams are now going this way, but it's quite Scandinavian in terms of being data informed and driven to make decisions, but not misled by data. We will still take objective and subjective data into decisions and use our own common experiences and knowledge to make the ultimate decision. For us, same as most clubs, will attract external loads and internal loads in terms of GPS, heart rate, whoop for some players if you want to do it. For the load periodising and individualising based on this throughout the weeks, the structure, same as most clubs would be doing. Then we would do also quite a lot of muscle testing and readiness testing in season, not just in pre-season. So in terms of pre-season, most teams will do the stuff you do at a faculty, the VO2 max test, your isokinetic test, your yo-yo on the field, get your MAS. So we use MAS to individualise some running for this kind of stuff, using all the data that we can to then individualise. Then we do quite a lot of testing in season. So we saw the stuff from Vald and other companies about like the force frame, squeezing, getting the groin isometric strength. We'll do the calf isometric strength and Nordics, jumping quite a lot in season. So it's not just if we do one counterpoint at the start of the season, in 4 months' time, we missed all this information in between. Up, spikes, down, are they progressing, are they regressing? Have they in this period of time got the same results, but they've actually peaked and missed an opportunity and they've just peaked down and they're coming back in. So we would test after each game, groin isometric strength, because we found the sensitivity for picking up fatigue, maybe muscle asymmetries as well, over 10%, picking up any kind of progression that they might actually be responding well to our gym in terms of that. Then if there was enough time between the next games, we'd do Nordic as well for the eccentric hamstring. And we'd do CMJ on the match day and the match day plus one. The match day plus one being more of a kind of fatigue marker in terms of like eccentric depth and braking speed, all this kind of stuff, looking at the metrics. So that would run concurrently all the way through. So players would be really used to it, not enjoy it. They really don't like a groin squeeze test. But and at the end of the day, it became the norm. So they would moan, but they would do it maximal effort. And that's what the balance is. We found the moan CMJ, no problem at all. They love it because they get the numbers in the background. Nordic, some will take it, some will not, but we always get maximum effort. So we then make changes based off not just protecting them in terms of injuries, but actual performance. That was a big thing for us. Was we're not trying to keep players off the pitch. It's the opposite.
Yeah.
We try to keep them on the pitch. We try to improve them and increase their performance. So I think using that mind shift to not just us, but to the physios and the medical staff, that we're not just testing to see if they're injured, and we're not just testing to see if they're tired. They've just played a match. We know they're tired.
Yeah.
But we're actually testing how are they responding to matches. Is it changing? Do they have a positive trend over the last time? Is their Z-score going up compared to their position? Okay, they did a whole load more sprint meters compared to the position demands in our system. Did they do like 1.5 over the Z-score for their position in our last match? Okay, but they're not fatigued. They've responded well to it. They've got a little bit of fatigue, but it's within the markers. There's no muscle asymmetry. They're actually performing well on the CMJ. Okay, so they're responding well. Can their load then be increased in the weeks to reach this high amount and push their ceiling away, like you would do with an aerobic speed reserve? You're trying to build both sections up. You're not just saying, okay, they can sprint more, that's brilliant, it protects them. You're actually trying to build up the gap between, okay, they can reach this maximum and they fatigue a little bit lower. So can you then push the ceiling of the maximum? And generally speaking, that's how we went about it, especially for power aspects. We're quite strong on power. So rate of force development and maximum peak power, all this kind of stuff.
Just taking it back to the groin squeeze, which I know you said was a favourite of the players. What would that look like? I don't know if you mentioned this, so apologies if you put this in, but what would that look like in terms of timing? So you said that was post-game.
Yep.
What would that look like timing-wise from literally the players coming off the pitch, sort of post?
No. So we've got a European style in terms of Traditionally, match day plus one would be if we talk. It was a one game week, Saturday. Match day plus one is in for the players, and match day plus two is off.
Right.
Just with the research around 70, 72 hours more relatable with 40 hours of peak of dorms and this stuff. So match day plus one, the players that played 45 minutes or more, the starters, or if you've got individual needs, they would come in, they would do an easy gym session, a little bit of body weight isometric stuff, testing, a little bit of biking. They would do the CMG and the groin bar squeeze that
Right.
day, short lever and long lever, and we'd look at that over time. Then the boys that were subs, they would do a pitch session, and then they would come in and they would also do a gym session, more power based, and sometimes it would be include a force frame if it's relevant timing. And then we'd track and make sure that no one's been missed in that time. It's like, okay, he's not done a groin bar test in a little while, he's been missed. We'll get a test on him when it's relevant.
Brilliant. No, that makes sense. Awesome, mate. We've covered some really cool
Yes.
stuff in there, and I know this is definitely going to get a few people thinking, and also that I imagine your inbox is going to start getting a few messages coming in as well.
Yeah, that's cool with me.
Just give people. We obviously mentioned LinkedIn before. Is that the best place to sort of reach out?
Yeah, because my social media is just personal stuff. I don't have a sports science social media. LinkedIn's the best thing.
Awesome. So I urge people to go and look at obviously the priming posts that you put out and some of the work that you put out as well, because you're putting some top stuff out. And if you've got sort of questions, fire them over to Kirk on LinkedIn. But I really appreciate you coming on, mate. I think you've covered some really interesting points. Not only obviously the initial move and tapping into people that are potentially going to be thinking about that, but also some of the work that you're doing at the club right now. So yeah, really, really appreciate your time coming on.
I appreciate it. It's been nice to chat. I've always listened for years, so it's nice to actually hear my voice on it. Or well, it maybe isn't nice to hear my voice on it. I've listened back to it and maybe cringe a few times, but it's been great.
Mate, you're more than welcome back on, I've got to say.
Brilliant. Look
Thanks,
forward to it, mate. Thank you.